Life is full of pain, but what's your alternative? Oh, it's a mess, but I'll find something cleaner. Oh, baby, where are you gonna go? Would you please point me kindly in the direction of something else? And will it be, in the end, nothing but you and me, ceasing to pretend that we aren't suffering, and we'll maybe see that we can make the best of it. And watermelons and lemonade are really nice. That's a song about watermelons and lemonade and existential suffering. Good guitar. Stay. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode. So we're talking about suffering and limitation and pain, more or less. So yeah, I guess here we go. How's that? All right. So it seems like well, you know, the Buddha said first noble truth, first noble truth, right? Is life is suffering. So life is suffering, which can sound very negative, but it's actually the beginning of true positivity, to realize normal life is suffering. But it doesn't have to be that way. Once you don't have to be Buddhist, but that's one angle, which I think is a legitimate technology of transformation, Buddhism, if you do it properly. But there's many other ways up the mountain. But basically it's saying you need to become conscious that you're normally in a state of suffering and that's your normal life. And as much as people complain and stuff, even people who would be complaining, I guess there's some people who would go, yeah, that's true for sure. But there's a lot of people, I think, who you go, well, that sounds kind of negative. I don't know about that idea. But yeah, you have to acknowledge it. And then that's how you can move forward into realizing that there is a way to get out of suffering. And the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, some fella, human being, who people, made a religion out of, but the Buddha means the awakened one, the one who's awake. Basically said, yeah, he called enlightenment the end of suffering. So basically they're like, yeah, okay, but that's what it isn't. It isn't suffering. But what is it? He's like, well, find out. I'm not telling you that. Focus on, getting there. There's some parable, if you've been shot with a poisoned arrow, instead of being like, okay, I want to know what kind of wood it's made of, what religion was the man who made the arrow, and, how far away was the arrow fired from, to all these little, understanding everything. It's like, no, the first thing is just get the arrow out, right? So get away from suffering, or transcend suffering. So anyway, but the idea is life, is suffering to varying extents. You say, oh, my bad moods, you're like, yeah, definitely suffering. But then even a lot of quote unquote normal life is actually suffering. Mild, almost all of us, I think, are in spend a lot of the time in at least a mild state of unsatisfactoriness, or not completely satisfied, on edge, not fully. How often are you fully at peace? I wouldn't change a thing about this moment, including, or I wouldn't want to get away from this moment. I'm not waiting for some future moment. Okay, when's this going to be over already? When you actually this moment's perfect, and I'm going to be here until it's over, because that's peace. And most of us aren't there most of the time. So suffering is a fact. And limitation, things aren't perfect. We don't have complete freedom. We don't have complete power. Like obstacles litter the way in life. And so, but I think most people, well, I don't know about most, yeah, I think most people, but in general, it seems like in the zeitgeist, there's this idea that like, okay, suffering, bad, like pain, bad, pleasure, good. But I think it's more complex than that. And you get to have a much more satisfying life when you don't see things that way, when you're like, can kind of appreciate that they're two sides of the same coin, and that, they each have a role to play. Because then when you're suffering, it'll be bad, but you can kind of start to appreciate it when you're not suffering too bad. You can go, oh yeah, but this is kind of necessary. It's part of the no sweet without sour sort of thing, or whatever. There's various things we're going to talk about today, where from my point of view of how suffering actually is useful and important, and we want it to a certain extent. And then once you have that point of view, I find myself like, and logically it seems to make sense, I think. Let me know if you disagree. Please let me know. That'd be cool. That it makes it less intense and less lengthy. Like suffering is, you don't get as deep into suffering and you don't get there as often once you start to appreciate suffering as like a kind of fucked up friend who comes knocking every now and then and kind of blows your mind a bit, but is actually a friend, helpful. So yeah, okay. So suffering, life suffering. The Buddha, and in general, the way out of suffering seems to be, whether it's Eckhart Tolle, Tolle. I'm going to stop pronouncing his name 3 ways from now on. The variously pronounced gentleman Eckhart, author of The Power of Now and A New Earth, and then all the legitimate spiritual teachers who aren't just trying to sell you golden tickets to their cult or whatever. They basically say be here now, Ram Dass or whatever. Just go with the flow. And it's the same thing as Epictetus, the Roman philosopher, was saying ages ago, or Marcus Aurelius with, meditations. Accept what you can. So here's a good way to put it. The serenity prayer that people use in Alcoholics Anonymous. May I have the courage to accept may I have the courage to control, oh my God, here we go. May I have the courage to change what I can, the serenity to accept what I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. So may I have the courage to change what I can, the serenity to accept what I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. So there's 2 paths, and you need to know which one you're on at any given point, left or right. Well, okay, I'm in traffic. Can I control traffic? No. Okay, so serenity is required, acceptance, tranquility. Just don't resist it. Just act as if that's what you want. Perfect, great, okay. And then, there's a lane that just opened up on the left. Turn, take it, Courage, that wouldn't require much courage, right? But courage might be like having a conversation with a loved one where it might go badly. You might get misinterpreted, or maybe you might, in the moment, emotions might get triggered and you might lose your ability to articulate your position properly. And you might be like, oh, what if I mess it up? And, what if we, I'm just not going to talk about it. That would be an example of failing to have courage to change something you could. So communication, like having the courage to just ask questions and express yourself. I can ask for a pay rise. I can go put myself out and, apply for new jobs, whatever, things where you're going into the unknown. You could face failure, rejection, humiliation, or just change, just your familiar structures changing in life. So you have to dealing with novelty, new things. So it requires courage. And so you're just knowing which of those is required in any given moment. That's where wisdom comes in, right? So which is, I guess, the fundamental virtue, it seems to me. Consciousness, basically, being another word for that. Or awareness. So yeah, there we go. That's kind of the way out of suffering, it seems. And in any given, there's other things involved, like, kind of not getting outside of time, like just living in the here and now, the power of now, be here now. A lot of people talk about the now, right? And more or less, it seems like the future and past, as well as imagination, like kind of just hypothetical time or whatever, that's all actually not real. It's all in your head. It's just you're running simulations in your mind, virtual reality simulations, which evolution has gifted us because it allows us to avoid problems and to take opportunities. But that it's not actually, you're kind of in la la land. It's useful within reason, but that's where we spend a lot of our time. We have holidays in the now and spend most of our lives in our heads in time, like thinking about the future and the past or hypothetical time, and yet it's not actually real. It's in your mind. You're running simulations, So, whereas it seems like to really go with and then a lot of thinking is problem solving, right? That's what evolution has given us thinking for, largely. Avoid the tigers, find the mushrooms or whatever, problem solving, or how to make, how to sustain our order, our systems of structure, and social cohesion within the tribe or whatever, and how to grow and develop. That's what thinking is doing, and we're spending most of our time in our minds. So we're kind of seeing life as a problem to solve, and so. But it seems that there's a bit of an itch built into that intentionally, I suppose, to motivate us to solve the problem. But once you're no longer some simple, kind of hominid, just like building shelters or whatever, and kind of living moment to moment. But you've got all the information of the internet and all the awareness that we have as privileged members of this materially advanced civilization. Not too spiritually advanced, I guess, at this point, but a minority quite spiritually advanced, I suppose. But like, we're aware of so much, and those primal mechanisms of itchy problem solving with all that information in our minds, like it's kind of, I think we're under a lot more pressure than anyone's been under before, at least, in recorded history that we're aware of. So it seems like the way is, okay, get out, go with the flow, like we said before, change what you can change, control what you can control, don't try to control what you can't, just go with the flow. Because what's the point? You can't control it. Are you insane? Why would you try to control that? You just save your energy for you'll have more energy for controlling the things you can control, instead of like wasting your energy, like, oh, I'm in traffic, blah, blah, blah. And then an opportunity comes up and you're too drained or you're too negative, in a negative frame of mind to take advantage of the opportunity. So being wise with your energy and your willpower. So it seems like there are other aspects to it. That's the core of it, it seems, but there are other aspects of getting out of suffering which kind of radiate off of that, which are hitched onto that. So it's like kind of necessary as a means to an end for getting to that core point. For example, time. So enter the now, get outside of, I'm thinking about the past. Oh, I'm thinking about the future. Like, oh, I'm really guilty or like, angry about or whatever. Oh, I'm ruminating on the past. Or I'm really, anxious and like, or I'm really kind of like jealous, or like maybe not, or jealous could be either way, I guess, but, or like greedy or something, like, oh yeah, you're thinking about the future and something you could get from it. And so, I'm being drawn in by these primal mechanisms into thinking about time, but actually life is now. Have you ever lived a moment, as Eckhart Tolle says, have you ever lived a moment that wasn't now? Like all your past, it was now when it happened. You lived it now. Your future, whenever all these future moments, which are going to happen, they will be now. And so if you kind of really pay attention, we don't really have any evidence that time is real, like that we can travel through time, for example. Maybe we can. Maybe it's both. Like, we we live our lives in the now, and we, by focusing on that and acting as if time's an illusion, then it'll, will liberate us from suffering, because we get outside of our mind and the problem-solving frame of mind, and we can just appreciate what's here. It may be true that that's just all there is, and there's just this one infinite space within which things are transforming, this emptiness, and then there's all these objects changing places, and there's just one moment. There's no time. It just looks like there's time. Or on a stage, there's all the actors moving around, but there's only one stage, right? It's not like there've been 50 different stages put there. Stage. Now put on the next stage for the next second. No, it's just one stage. So it's possible that that's the case. And then, or it could be that, in some way it's both, and there's time. Now, that's not quite the point today, given we're talking about suffering, but that's just to say, there are things which are worth thinking about on the road of getting out of suffering, or being positive, the place for positive thinking, in general, it kind of is a switch you can flick the switch, just be positive. And it's a great thing to experiment. Just be positive. Just flick the switch. Say, I am positive now. You might think, no, I can't do that. Really? Investigate that. Are you sure? How do you know? Maybe we're kind of addicted to the negativity. Maybe that's part of evolution as well, the itch. We want to solve problems. But maybe actually you can just sidestep the whole thing and just, here I am. And just, turn on positivity. Be like, as an experiment, that's really fun. Just anytime, especially to when you're feeling good, devote yourself to, okay, next time I'm feeling really bad, I'm going to try and tune into this feeling I'm having now. Try to get back to it. Let's play a little game. See if I can do it. The next time you're feeling really bad, go, okay, I'm going to try to tune back into that happy feeling. And you can try as a game, go, I'm just going to totally change my emotional state, because that with just by my willpower. Boom, do it. See how we go, But then sometimes there's a time for positivity, but then sometimes you have to admit, actually, no, my life is falling apart, or I'm not the person I want to be, or I'm flawed and I'm making all these mistakes and I need to change myself, or people around me are flawed and, I need to communicate with them, or maybe I need to end a relationship with them and say, oh, you're not uplifting me. We can't be, I don't want to be friends anymore, or whatever it is, there's a place for negativity because it can send us signals. But so they're time, positive mindset. They're just two examples of things which aren't quite as deep into the core of how to get past suffering. Although perhaps that's just from my point of view. I'm not past suffering constantly. So I don't know, but I'm given that I'm not enlightened, I must be missing things. So, take this with a salt mine, or at least a grain of salt. But this is, I think it's worth sharing, right? Because I've suffered in my time. We all suffer, right? But I have, I guess, been obsessively thinking about it for a long period of time and reading books. So I think I've got something to share about it. I used to be quite, I had periods of pretty intense depression and anxiety, where, even feeling really uncomfortable around even friends, and then that brings on shame because you feel like, oh my God, what am I doing? I'm meant to be trusting them, but I'm pulling away into a little shell and they're interacting with a fake self. So there's all these negative emotions which come on board with it. And that's all very heavy. So whoever's suffering, if you're listening, then, it is felt, and to the extent that I can, I feel your pain, I can't really feel it, but I have felt my own pain, and I wouldn't wish it on any of you. So I'm sure you wouldn't wish your pain on anyone else, unless you're vindictive. Hopefully not. I think if we wish pain on others, then we end up wishing it upon ourselves, not just because we are each other in the deeper sense, but also because the part of your brain, which which attacks others, whether through just feeling negative to them, or whether actually planning real attacks on them, or arguments or fighting or whatever, the part of your brain which is at war with others, that's different to the part of your brain which is at war with yourself. but they're part of, if you zoom out just one step, they are part of this, the part of the brain which is at war with things. And so by empowering the part of your brain which is at war with others, you are empowering the general part of the brain which is at war with things in general, and that's going to affect you. So that's karma, instant karma, where if you become a hateful person against others, all that negativity and poison is going to come back to you, and immediately, basically, you're going to be pushing yourself further away from peace and love, which are real things and not just like funny little ideas for stupid people. But yeah, like there are real things you can experience in the moment, and that's why we're here, I think. Anyway, so suffering. I've mentioned kind of the fact that suffering is a thing. It exists. And then basically how to get out of it, from in a nutshell, or one way to get out of it. I'd say suffering, basically, it comes from resisting the moment, right? You're not fully accepting the present moment. And so, there are, there's physical things. You can have physical pain, and you can have problems, things that go wrong, whatever. But if you think about it, you might say, I've got this terrible situation. All these family members are sick, or, the world's really terrible and really stressful and there's a lot of pressure. Or, I've got some physical problems which are really, they really mess with my mind, and I can't, think clearly because it's just, I've got arthritis or something, and fair enough, that can be very challenging. But my point of view would be that at the end of the day, it's always down to your mind, because there are other people who would be able to be in the exact same situation, but they would be able to accept it and be at peace. So if they can do that with the same external situation and internal situation, then what, and there are many examples of this. We know people have been very, very sick, and yet they've been enlightened sages. They've been completely at peace with it, or maybe not full on enlightened or something, but meaning completely transcended suffering and in a state of constant peace, which is very unusual for humans, but it does exist. There's a small minority who are in that state at the moment. There are people who are kind of somewhere in the middle, very wise people who aren't, totally beyond it, but they are kind of on that path or on a spectrum there. But those people there are many cases where they had very terrible physical problems or crazy life problems. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, saying he's in the Gulag in the Soviet Union, or Viktor E. Frankl, and saying kind of, I think they both, who was in, concentration camp, the Jewish guy who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, and then Solzhenitsyn wrote the Gulag Archipelago. And I believe they both found a state of profound peace, even though they're in these terrible situations, because they had realized, suffering pushed them so deep that they struck rock bottom, and the core, which they found was their own mind, and that they can never take away your freedom to see life in the way you want to see it, your willpower, your consciousness, and that's actually an internal affair over which no foreign demon has any power. The only power they have is if you give it to them by accident or intentionally, or willfully, blindly. So, for example, someone's putting you in a cage. It's actually, Epictetus would say, Stoic philosopher, that it's not the situation which causes you suffering, which makes you suffer. It's your attitude to the situation which makes you suffer. It's your mental response which makes you suffer. Because you say, I shouldn't be here. I'm a good person. This is wrong. That person's bad. It's wrong. That makes you suffer. But you would have the potential to say, well, I'm in a cage, but as a spiritual exercise, we're floating in space. I can't control this, I'm just going to go with the flow and act as if I want this and see what happens. And then, oh, wow, what do you know? Acting as if I want it, I'm much calmer. I found peace. And then I can gather my thoughts and think clearly, and maybe I can have a good conversation with the guard, and maybe I can make some progress. Or maybe I just accept it for a while, and I just meditate and put my mind to good use while I'm here, and travel within, and just think about life, and compose poetry in my head or sing songs in my head. instead of, railing against the injustice of the inevitable. So not to say we should all have empathy and compassion for those who are suffering, because even if we can get beyond it and transcend it, and also in a sense it is an illusion, because it's actually the one who suffers is not actually your soul. That would be your mind or your ego. It's us when we believe we are our thoughts, the character, the human character we play, which is very important. We need an ego to function. It's totally normal. But eventually the butterfly can transcend, can graduate from caterpillar school, and so you can get to the state where you're a soul and you're like, I'm Leonardo DiCaprio, I'm playing Jack, this is really fun, but I'm not Jack, I'm Leo. In the same way, Leonardo DiCaprio can have an enlightenment experience and go, oh, I'm actually the universe, I'm not even Leo. And so can you. And from that point of view, you go, oh, I'm not actually suffering. I only suffer when I think I am the character. When I realize that I'm the actor, and I just accept the situations as they come, and then, there's no more suffering. So both because suffering is avoidable and because ultimately it's an illusion, we might think like, oh, who cares if you're suffering? Like that's your fault, and it's an illusion anyway, it doesn't matter. But nonetheless, when you're in that state, it doesn't feel like an illusion. And so just like a nightmare, that's not real, but it's a real experience. You are actually experiencing an illusion. So it's a real experience of an illusion, right? And who knows, maybe it's like actually real just in some other dimension, like astral plane or whatever, with different laws of physics. Who knows? Lucid dreamers talk about this and outer body experiences. But nonetheless, just like a nightmare is really terrifying, you're experiencing genuine terror. The fact that it's not ultimately real doesn't really matter. You are experiencing those emotions. And we have beautiful experiences in a dream, like looking into someone's eyes and it's just pure love and beauty. Or that's a real experience of beauty and contentment, And so suffering, even if ultimately we can't, the good news is we can transcend it, and even we've already transcended it technically, because ultimately we're actually dreaming basically when we're suffering. It's not actually real ultimately. If you say take certain plant medicines or lysergic acid, diethylamide or something, or if you just have meditate very deeply, or you just have a very deep experience with a loved one, you're looking at a sunset and you just get this moment of stillness and you're just really calm, and then you turn your mind toward your problems, I think you will realize that there never was a problem, you go, oh, what was I so worried about? And you think about those situations. From my point of view, when you get to really deep peace, it's not like, oh, thank God that negative situation is behind me. I'm glad I'm not there anymore. Usually when you get to really deep peace and deep consciousness or high, clear consciousness, it's like, oh, funny, if I was in that moment right now, I wouldn't mind. That would be okay. I could even enjoy that moment. And that's the thing, I think the key to suffering, why when we think it's really inevitable, it's because we're so far, we would think that our happy self would want nothing to do with it. But I think the realization that our happy self would be totally happy in that moment, that can be a secret weapon. Go, wait a minute. So right now, my happy self could be happy with this moment. So what's stopping me from doing that? The answer is nothing. Well, or your own consciousness, just kind of solving the puzzle of understanding, who am I? Not your mind. There's a clue. Spoiler alert. And being able to not let your emotions. The emotions give us thoughts. They're like feeding us lines, like speechwriter. So you need to not trust your emotions and not trust your mind. You need to trust peace. And that can be very strange because it feels like you're not trusting yourself, but actually there's a fake self inside you. There's a parasite pretending to be you. And so it's a process of learning not to identify with this parasite. I'm calling it a parasite, but you could call it a helper. It got us through evolution. It was very useful. But at this point, there's a lot of people who are suffering very intensely. And so it is accurate from one point of view to label it as like kind of a parasite and a problem. And it's not your true self. It's like your assistant who's gone AWOL and is pretending to be CEO. You know, that's the ego. And it's kind of like your negative emotions. It's your mind, but often it gets supercharged by negative emotions. And that, you know. So to take a step back. So we were saying that I needed a glass of water. Oh, that's right. Yeah. So, yeah. So suffering ultimately is an illusion. This is my point of view, right? And it seems to make sense. I mean, in general, I try to preface things with like, I don't really know. And I think when you admit that, that's when you really get in touch with the source of knowledge. Keep the gates open to fresh insight and corrections. So look, I don't really know, but based upon what I have come to understand and what I've read from people and what makes sense to me in my experiences, and I'm reassured by I'm open-minded to the possibility that I'm closed-minded. And that's a good sign, right? That's reassuring. It's like, okay, the fact that I'm willing to say, yeah, I don't really know, that actually makes me more confident that I do know. That's a little paradox you have to learn to dance with. But anyway, so from my point of view, suffering is an illusion, ultimately, and we can transcend it. So it's actually it's not life's fault, it's actually our own fault, if you want to blame anyone, why we haven't transcended suffering. And yet at the same time, the opposite is true. Suffering is not an illusion. We really do suffer. It is very uncomfortable, and we need to give people respect, compassion, empathy, and assistance with transcending their suffering. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to sit on the mountain and let people suffer. It's like, that's like the bodhisattva thing. It's like open-heartedness, saying, even if my brothers and sisters are in a dream, suffering, I would like them not to be in that dream because they don't realize they're in a dream. So that in a way, they're actually literally suffering. It's a paradox, you know? Most deep things seem to be paradoxes. Is the answer yes or no? It's both. You know, usually anything deep. For example, do I surrender to life or do I kind of conquer life and assert my will over life? Actually, I think it's both. I think you need to surrender. You know, things you can't control, just accept it. But then also, there are these things that you can control and you need to assert your willpower, or you can, and you should, because it's going to uplift you and all other beings with love and happiness, and protect the planet. Ultimately, you know, that's one bonus. You know, have a healthier humans means a healthier planet. You know, so there's various reasons why nihilism doesn't really make sense. And yeah, on some level, it's kind of whatever happens is fine. But on another level, it's like, no, we should try to overcome suffering ourselves, and we should help other beings do it too. And there are various reasons which make it at least 51% good idea to do that. I think it's actually much higher, but still. So there's that, right? We should respect people who are suffering, even if you think it's outrageous and stupid, like a little child has lost their toy. Someone else is playing with their toy. You think that's so stupid, you shouldn't be suffering. I don't care about you. You can reflect, great question, you know, in what ways do I do the same thing? Well, sometimes I disagree with people and they can't see my point of view, and it's very frustrating. That's not so different, actually. I'm trying to control something that's out of my control, and which ultimately doesn't really matter too much, right? What's hinging on that? Do I need them? The truth needs no defense. It is the truth. You know, them being confused isn't going to change the truth. The truth's fine. So, okay. And so then you can maybe look at the child and go, okay, look, you don't need to be suffering, but you are suffering. And I will give you, you know, love and kindness and support. And hopefully others will do that for us when we are having our own tantrums. And then, so there's that about suffering being kind of ultimately not real, but in a sense, paradoxically, it is real. And of course, to begin down this road, you need to admit that it's real first, but then you need to think about things from multiple perspectives. Am I a bunch of organs, or am I a bunch of cells, or am I a bunch of subatomic particles, or am I Jamie, or am I part of, am I Ireland / Australia? Am I the humans? Am I Gaia? Am I the universe? Which one? Maybe I'm all of them, you know? Maybe the relevant category to use depends on the moment and the situation. We need to be fluid, you know, and kind of dance around like very limber, you know, enthusiastic frogs, you know? So, so then the other point about suffering, like, oh, it's your fault, which can be very heavy. But it is true, I think. And yet, again, both sides. It's important to understand and admit, acknowledge both sides. And then in each given moment, you need to know which side should you lean into more. So sometimes maybe you're just hanging out, smoking weed, doing nothing to improve your life, and you're suffering, you're not happy, you're not working on your goals or something, then, or whatever it is, you're drinking too much, or you're just, you know, maybe you're not taking any drugs or whatever, but you're just living your life, but you're not really happy, and you might be resentful of life, you know, or people or whatever. Maybe the thought, oh, I am responsible for all of this, could be healing and set you into balance and set you into action to get you moving. Go to the gym. Are you exercising 20 minutes a day? Are you getting yourself to the point where you're extremely uncomfortable? Like, oh my God, why am I running? Are you doing that every day? No. Okay. So before you start blaming life for all your problems, why don't you start doing that little thing? Or, you know, reading, doing little things, one little thing every day which gives you joy, but which, you know, isn't hurting anyone else. Read a bit, you know, or listen to some good music, or learn an instrument or whatever, or take a pottery class. So, and help other people, you know, which is a great way to get out of suffering, is helping others, you know. Suffering, unfortunately, is quite narcissistic. When we are really suffering, naturally, due to evolution, right, we start to focus on ourselves more, because we need to protect ourselves more. And then, you know, so things are getting intense. Instead of caring about all the planet, we just start to care about humans, like COVID, right? Oh yeah, throwing all these masks into the ocean, like, yeah, well, at least we're safe or whatever. Or like, you know, or we're going to kill 1 million sheep because they might catch the virus. It's like, oh yeah, save 3 people, kill 1 million sheep. Okay, very brave of you. Or even more like, oh, then it's something else is even more intense. We might go, instead of caring about all of humanity, even, we just care about our country. Or instead of caring about our country, we just care about our family. Or instead of caring about our family, we just care about ourselves. You know, so when the more suffering comes in, the more of a threat it is to become narcissistic and selfish. But ironically and kind of tragically or comically, I don't know, there's a shortcut out of it, which is you start thinking about others more. You're like, okay, I'm going to think about others once I fix my own problems and get myself out of suffering. Well, if you want to do that, start thinking about others is actually a pretty good way. You go, okay, I'm having a bad time. Well, interesting. Given that apparently my mind is at the crime scene of every problem, maybe maybe my thinking, as Einstein said, you can't, something like this, paraphrasing, you can't solve a problem with the same level of consciousness which created the problem, or that you can't solve a problem with the same kind of thinking which created the problem. So maybe you go, okay, let's try something out of left field, think outside the box. I'm not going to try to fix my problem. I'm just going to leave it there. What problem do you have, Larry? Oh, you wouldn't want to hear about it. No, yeah, tell me what's going on. He tells you his problem. And then you try and help him, talk to him, or do something practical for him. It seems like personal experience, and then from what people say, it seems like that's actually one of the fastest ways to raising your happiness. Do things for others. But yeah, so that's another thing, right? We're talking about suffering being our fault, my fault, right? It's very confronting, and people don't want to hear this. Victim consciousness. No, it's not. I'm the victim. How dare you say that, you know? But look, if you want to get better, like there's a time when it's important to say, hey, it's not your fault, right? But then there's a time when it's right and useful, and the only healing thing to say, no, it is your fault, dear. And, you know, you need to acknowledge that. And that might be very bitter and painful, but it's just like a fever which kills off some virus, you know? Like you need to go through that. It's going to be healing for you. But then, yeah, then there's other times when it's like, you know, like, no, look, and it's true in a sense that, you know, it's not your fault. It's so many things are out of our control. It's your genetics. You know, not like, I think most health problems aren't genetic. Like that's kind of like overblown thing, money-making scheme for corporate medicine, right? But more or less, I don't know, shooting from the hip, pew pew, but you know, something like that. But there is something to be said for like, oh, you know, your genetics, like say like I've got an eye condition or whatever, and that's genetic, right? But and it limits my ability in life, like I, you know, can't drive or whatever. There's things like this, or like whatever. I won't go into detail, but you know, like that's been a source of suffering for me, right? Where like things which get frustrating or annoying because like, you know, people think you're ignoring them because you can't see them, but they can see you 10 times sooner, so they think you're ignoring them. Or people are flirting with you and you don't realize, and then the opportunity's gone, you know, or you know, messing up at work because you can't see things or whatever. So that would be genetic. That's not totally in my control. But then my choice to respond to it, I always have that power to respond to it. And so that is in my control. But then you might say even, okay, what makes, surely like genetics, some people have, maybe there's some sort of genetic predisposition where some people are just more grouchy, you know, and so maybe some people are more likely to hold on to the negativity because of their genetics, you know, the way their brain works or whatever. And even if that isn't the case, it's definitely the case that family and culture condition us in certain ways, where some cultures are more like, oh, look, go with the flow, Buddhist influenced or something. Other cultures are more like, no, control, dominate, take control, you know, be a man. And so if you're raised in a culture which is really like, no, must control, don't let things just, you know, you must be perfect or whatever, then, you know, your responses to, I've got some problem, like, and whatever your problems are, you know, like, or whatever, you know, we all have different problems which we inherit from our circumstances, right? Then seems like a certain element of it isn't within our control. And it's kind of just like some people, well, I've been conditioned by my culture and my family and maybe my genetics to have certain problems and maybe even certain limitations on my ability to practice what I'm talking about here, of like the path of wisdom, of like, you know, bending with the wind, like the wise tree, you know, instead of snapping, you know, oh, I can't control it, bend, go with the flow, and then I can control this. All right, you know, and you might even bring in past lives and say, you know, your conditioning from, if past lives, you know, exist, and if reincarnation is the mechanics of the universe, which, you know, I suspect, but I don't know. I've no dog in the fight, you know, like I think it seems likely for various reasons I won't get into right now, but perhaps I mentioned it in episode 7, Awakening, I don't know. But either way, you know, like if that is the case, then perhaps the experiences of us in the past, or even of our ancestors, which gets passed on through epigenetic memory or morphogenetic fields, potentially, Rupert Sheldrake's work, there are these influences from the past through our ancestors. And, you know, so, you know, it seems like history of addiction in families, or histories of, you know, violence or whatever, or all kinds of issues which can come up, trauma and things. So there are these things which are pressing in upon us. And so, and some people would be like, no, look, I have my free will. It's my responsibility. I'm not going to blame any of that. And I think in general, that's probably the right perspective to have more than half of the time. But also, I think sometimes, you know, you need to say, look, go give yourself a break. And because some people would be like, no, it's my fault, it's my fault. And then got this internalized pressure. And so they're so uptight, they can't make progress toward liberation from suffering. Because like, no, it's my fault. I didn't, you know. And so I think sometimes those people need to do the opposite. And they have to go, well, actually, it's not my fault. And just sit with that. Say, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. Let Robin Williams, like, what's that movie? Matt Damon, what's it called again? Whatever, it's like, it's not your fault. Yeah. So I think that is very important. And, jiggle between the two, trying to open the key. Oh, it's not working. All right, jiggle that way, jiggle this way, You're stretching out before exercising. Stretch both sides, what's the harm? So it's good to think both ways, both sides. And then I think that kind of can bring us to a kind of three-dimensional picture. You got two different perspectives. They kind of overlap and give you a kind of, more a picture with deeper perspective, shall we say. So that's kind of in more detail, I guess, like why suffering is here and then how to get out of it from my point of view. Now, I want to mention what I kind of alluded to earlier, which is the benefits of suffering. And I think when we keep them in mind, it helps us both to not take suffering as such a big deal and to transcend it, but also just makes us happier, and it's interesting anyway, So for one thing, suffering makes us appreciate the absence of suffering. No sweet without sour. Such is life. To be, what's the poem? To be doomed is a blessing. No sweet without sour. Such is life. Waiting for God's next plot twist. Then the worse it's been, the better it is. Then the worse it is, the worse it's been, the better it is. All karma redeemable in final bliss, when trauma is let out of the cage and becomes a white dove sailing away, and we proud parents of transformation. Poem called Happy Tears. I can't remember the poet, but apparently he's got terrible memory. But suffering, like if you're drinking beer every day, okay, it gets a bit old, right? And you probably need to drink more to get a kick out of it. But then you drink it, you don't drink it. Oh, I really feel like a beer. Don't drink it. Then the next day, okay, I do drink a beer today. Oh, it's even better than before, right? Or absence makes the heart grow fonder, like, oh, I haven't seen you in 2 weeks. Wow, it's so great to see you, and naturally that's part of the flow of life, so it makes us appreciate things more. You're hungry, food tastes better. I haven't watched a movie in ages, let's watch a movie. All right, and then you start watching movies too much, you're like, okay, let's read a book. I haven't read a book in ages, So it keeps things interesting. Suffering is just part of the general pattern of polarity, yin and yang, black and white, whatever. And so if we could just be blissed out all the time, unless that's because you're aware. I think it seems like you can be in that state where you're peaceful all the time and feeling bliss a lot of the time, maybe most of the time. But that would be from an awareness of this polarity of suffering. And basically you still suffer, but you just kind of don't resist suffering. Oh, it's raining. Okay, fine. You don't kind of go, bow your head and get, make it a problem. You're like, that's just the weather. It's raining. Oh, I'm feeling some sadness. Wow. Okay, someone died. That's really sad. Or someone's suffering. I know it's an illusion, but my heart is kind of overflowing with a feeling of affection and a wish for them to be well, and a recognition that they are experiencing real suffering because that's the experience they're having. So you can have, I think, from that blissed out perspective, it's like you have the you can have a experience of like more or less like complete positivity constantly, but it would only be possible. It seems like that is only possible by integrating light and dark, suffering and peace, and understanding that each has their place, which is what we're talking about here. But in general, with that excluded, You don't, like, in the normal sense of the term, like if you could just get rid of suffering, yeah, and like, oh, I just want to be really excited all the time or really happy, I think it would get boring. And so I think it's a perfect drama the way it's set up, that like you get bummed out and then you get excited again, and it's great. And you could even say not just that being unhappy, makes happiness better, but happiness makes being unhappy better, maybe, like it's more meaningful. Um, if you were just unhappy all the time, then I guess it loses all its meaning. But when you're normally happy and then suddenly you experience unhappiness, it's kind of got a more meaning to it. It's got that context of separation from home, and that kind of, shivering in the wilderness vibes. So I think even from that, which I hadn't really thought of before, like probably goes vice versa. But so let's see, suffering, like, so suffering, apart from avoiding hedonic adaptation or tolerance or whatever, where you get, used to things, and so it's kind of necessary, it seems, to have happiness, and we like happiness. So it's the diversity, it's the variety, spice of life, but also suffering. Like you can't get something for nothing, right? We're born into the universe. And we, especially anyone listening to this, how do you have time to be listening to this? You must have a pretty good life. You're not like slaving in the salt mine somewhere, So, like, that's pretty good. Or you're not, I'm sure we all know people who have died. I don't think they're listening to this, so that's cool. We're still here. So, we're blessed with so many things, and it's a great exercise, again, for transcending suffering, is gratitude. Being like, and they say, they say a lot, but they say that abundance, gratitude is the foundation of all abundance, or the source of all abundance. Foundation, I guess. Like, you need to appreciate what you have before you can attract more things. Because so it's just you need to acknowledge the abundance which is here already. If you're not acknowledging that, then you're cutting yourself off from that abundance which is here. So how are you going to connect to the other abundance? You connect to this abundance, and then you kind of move through it, you experience it, you feel it, start connecting to greater abundance. It's kind of a metaphor, but it seems to work that way, where like when you're happy, when you're being grateful, like wake up in the morning, you're feeling bad. Okay, force yourself to think of 3 things you're grateful for. I'm grateful I'm not hungover and just feeling like every moment is torture and I just can't wait for this to be gone, but it's probably going to take hours and it's just, oh my God, why am I so stupid? Why did I drink so much? I'm not feeling that. Remember that? I remember. Not good, not good. It's nice to be healthy. Very good. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the beautiful moments I've had with my friends. That's really good. I'm grateful I have the ability to think clearly, and I'm not, say, in a coma or something, or I'm not, bless their hearts, whatever. But like, I'm not, don't have some sort of like cognitive disability or something, which would allow me to enjoy a certain level of experience, but not the blessed heights of kind of awareness which are available if you really want to play the game of kind of trying to introduce yourself to the sky, and so like you can be grateful or simple things. I'm grateful, and apparently things involving other people, what they've done for us is very good. I'm grateful my colleague allowed me to take that day off. That's really cool. Nice. Or I'm grateful grateful for my friend who, bought me that drink or whatever. Oh, that was cool, or whatever, or complimented me, or, whatever, made a joke when I was feeling down. Think of 3 things, could be small, that apparently, doing that daily, is very good for you, and then will attract more good things in life, Gratitude is the attitude. So, so suffering, yeah, like it balances out, with all these good things. So then, of course, uh, you know, to get that, like, I would take that deal, and I guess I did take that deal. Like, you can have all these amazing things. However, it won't always be nice. You will have, some negative things too. We're like, okay, what's the alternative? Nothing. Well, all right, sounds good. Let's do it. I choose. I choose option. I choose the only option. Well, technically, you're not choosing. Don't tell me that. I'm a free being. Um, the option is choosing itself. So yeah, Now, big thing, probably the most important thing, and probably the most novel thing I could tell you, because I think I don't know, I haven't heard someone say this before, but it seems to me like your suffering is, well, I've heard someone say it's a teacher, right? Eckhart Tolle says, some people are spiritual teachers, like people who help them down the road of transcending suffering and becoming more wise and happy and peaceful and aware. But and your dog could be your spiritual teacher in a way. It could help you kind of connect to just the positivity of life and just changing your state and being happy or whatever. But everyone shares one spiritual teacher, which is suffering, and that suffering teaches us and forces us to go deeper. The greatest artists are almost always people who have suffered very deeply. And often great intellectuals, also people have suffered very deeply. And so they've kind of gone like, I can't keep going, like this. This is just so much pressure. And so they've got all this energy, which is an experience of pressure and, discomfort. But then they are forced to try to direct their willpower at some sort of mode of transformation, changing this situation. And they're actually got a lot of energy to do that via the pressure. And so kind of like martial artists going with the movement of the opponent, instead of trying to resist them, go with them, but just modify their direction so that they roll over and you're on top of them now or whatever. Or you throw them or whatever. That you're kind of doing that with the energy of suffering and pressure, which is put upon you. And you go, I can't take it anymore. And and then maybe you start reading some books. Some business executives just going crazy starts reading The Power of Now, and hides it from his friends. He's like, I don't want them to know what I'm up to. They're so embarrassing. But he goes, oh my God, I've been sleepwalking. Oh my God, that's crazy. And the suffering forced that person into that situation. It wouldn't have happened otherwise. Most likely. When that's suffering does this. Suffering goes, oh my God, like, or I'm sick, or I'm physically kind of suffering from something. I usually use suffering to mean kind of your mind is resisting a situation. So it's not just pain, but yeah, like you're sick, and then that force can be the trigger to make you go, I need to take care of my health more. Or you're lonely. You go, oh, I need to see friends more. So suffering is kind of, it's a messenger, right? Like emotions, anger, fear, sadness, all these things, they have a purpose. They're a signal giving you information. Oh, I really loved that person and now they're gone. Okay, that's why I'm sad. And that signal maybe is go, okay, thank you, messenger. I got the signal. You can go now, by the way, or maybe have a cup of tea there. You can stay just, a little bit. I'm just going to contemplate the message of like, yeah, that person is gone. I really cared about that person and I still care, but okay. And you focus on that, and then you go, all right, thank you, messenger. Hope you enjoyed the tea. Off your trot, and so you get the message of like, okay, how much you loved them, and that maybe that's over and you need to change or move on or whatever. Or it's anger. The message is someone is pushing you further than you should go, and you need to do something about it. So that message goes, okay, what can I do? What can I do? And you have to take some sort of response, or maybe you can't control it, and the action is inaction, just a conscious, intentional choice to just go with it. But in general, it'd be like some sort of action of, okay, I need to reassert a boundary here. So that's it's not a comfortable thing, anger, you feel more power because it's like an active thing. You're pushing back. It's fight instead of flight or freeze. But nonetheless, it's still negative and it's uncomfortable, and it drains you. You can't be in that state too long, otherwise it's not healthy. It's like a temporary thing that's meant to happen to motivate you to action, and then the emergency's gone, and the emotion should be gone too. Same with all those negative emotions. The sympathetic nervous system coming online, primal reptilian brain, when you should go back to the parasympathetic, the kind of calm, mammalian, like social connection, go with the flow, thinking more logically most of the time. So, but anger can send that message. Okay, I need to take action. Oh, my boss is exploiting me. I need to have a conversation, or I need to just say no at a certain point, or I need to do something, or someone's doing something absolutely wrong and I need to go push them over and say, hey, leave my friends alone, or whatever it is, So that can be useful. Or same thing with fear. Oh, this is really scary. I need to get out of here. This is very dangerous. Or it's very scary, and it makes you think, okay, there's a threat, and then you can decide what you should do. So suffering is communicating information there. It's useful. And if we were like, oh, I'll just take some pills and opioids and then so I don't notice anything, then you wouldn't be as effective in the world, So suffering is required for that balance and that ability to engage with life. So that's on the surface level, right? Just basic, emotions. But then on a deeper level, and this is something like what I said there, I have heard people say before. This is something, which I kind of thought about and felt like, oh, wow, that kind of redeems all suffering, in my opinion, would be realizing that, like, in life, sometimes we make mistakes. We do things which are out of balance. They're not the right thing to do. For some reason, it causes a problem, right? And so anytime you do something which wasn't the right thing to do, it's out of balance, it kind of tips your life out of balance, right? You weren't kind enough, you're a bit too shirty with someone, or you're a bit too lazy, or you're a bit too hardworking, or whatever it is. You make some sort of choice which isn't really the best in that situation. It will cause problems. It'll cause a cascade, a snowball effect of problems and reactions to reactions. And if you keep doing that same pattern, you will just kind of strengthen that cascade. And eventually, the problems are going to get so significant that they're going to really make you very uncomfortable. And you're going to be forced to pay attention to them. And you can ignore them, but eventually, suffering will go, you go, I can't bear it, and you have to pay attention to it. And then you will notice this breadcrumb trail leading you right back to the imbalance which created it. And you didn't know you were out of balance. That's why you did it wrong, by definition, like you were unconscious of the imbalance. And so the suffering is teaching you, oh, I caused all this suffering. I don't want the suffering. And it was because of this thing. Oh, I see. I shouldn't do that thing. That was a mistake. I made a mistake. I understand now. I won't do it again. Or at least I'm going to try to not do it again. And it starts the process. So it's teaching you how to live in alignment with the flow of creation. And this is happening in countless different ways in different aspects of our lives. And if we didn't have that suffering, how the hell are we going to figure out how we're out of balance? It's this alarm clock which goes, or like, the side of, like when it's time to wake up, or the side of the road that goes when, I hope that wasn't too intense in the microphone, but don't mean to make you suffer in this podcast. The side of the road which makes the noise when you start to go off it. It's like, oh, what a shame. There's this noise and this buzzing. It's kind of uncomfortable. It's like, but that's how you know that you're going out of balance, losing your alignment. And it's threatening. So this is a feedback loop which helps you live better and have a sustainably happy life and healthy. So when you think about that, like all your problems, every single thing you can do wrong is going to create the negative karma, the conditions of suffering, which you, by applying your mind, will be able to, like a detective, follow the trail of clues and find your way back to the source, and then learn the lesson, and then, avoid that in future and be wiser and happier. Then suffering kind of ceases to be this enemy and this dark shadow that we have to flee or fight or just freeze in front of. And we can kind of understand that it's a friend, it's a teacher, it's an ally. And, in general, see the best, expect the best from people and you get the best. In general, some people are, just going to try to, pull the wool over your eyes and exploit you, but in general, most people, if you treat them well, and then if they start going over the line, okay, you can push back, whatever. But you treat them well and with trust, and you give them the benefit of the doubt, like that they're not going to be screwing you over. Then they are much more likely to treat you well. And so I think with suffering, we can kind of do that and just see it as like, okay, I'm in the universe and I suffer, and that's really kind of annoying. But ultimately, this is kind of like this benevolent force, which is kind of tough love helping me. And it's got no grudge against me. The universe isn't against me. Things don't happen to me. They definitely don't happen against me. They happen for me. They're helping me learn. It's in my interests. And not just in terms of temporary information of like what reaction I need to have to something because of the emotion I'm feeling right now, but kind of deeper things like I'm just unhappy. What's going on? And you can dig deep and find those deep messages of where you were out of alignment 5 years ago when you made a choice or when you said something. And so when we can incorporate that with the more basic understanding that like there is this path out of suffering, I think we can start to simultaneously pursue the direct path of going with the flow with life, while controlling life to the extent that we can. And how do we control it? What's the aim? Well, whatever makes you happy, have fun. It's your game. It's your life. It's your private universe. So long as you're not stepping on others' toes, you're not preventing others from playing their own game, So if you're not hurting others, if you're respecting their sphere of influence and freedom, and there'll be some blurry overlap between your spheres, that's fine. You just try to navigate that, as calmly and wisely as you can, but with give and take and negotiation. But basically, that'll be a minority of the time. So you live your life, do what you want, whatever makes you happy, pursue your, create your own story, be yourself. Everyone else is taken, as Oscar Wilde said. And if you really want to play the best game of all, do that and have fun in your own way through time, but understand that the real game is one moment at a time, just being in the moment and appreciating whatever you're doing, that's more important than the game of the temporal game of through time, whatever you're doing is the eternal game, the eternal now, the perpetual present, just being here. And a large part of that game, kind of level one, is transcending suffering. And so you're pursuing your game, you're playing your game, you're living your life, finding your own joy and meaning in whatever way you can, while allowing others to do their own version of the same thing. But each moment, you're focused more on the present moment than on time. And you think about the future when you need to, the past when you need to. But in general, you're biased towards the present. You focus more on the now. And this improves your life over time anyway. That your future is determined by the quality of your present. Each future comes from the present. You're sowing the seeds of that now. And level one of this game is you're here and you're trying to learn from suffering how to transcend it. It's teaching you. It's like a little Riddler, a little Sphinx, but it's benevolent and it messes us up. And we might, like a friend who always has our back, but sometimes annoys us and says things or does things or maybe like a parent almost, who does things that we don't like, but they're actually in our interest. It's for our own good. and they really know that, and they really have our back, and it's annoying and stuff. But then once we cool off, we're like, actually, no, I see, yeah, they're right, and they're just trying to help me, you know. And so we learn to transcend suffering, both by the simultaneous two routes of the now and in general in time. So that right now, just go with the flow of life, control what you can control, surrender to what you can't, but also these more general things of self-improvement and aligning ourselves with virtue and balance and harmony. So, okay, I'm a human being. I like doing that. Do I do it too much? Do I do it too little? And, all the breadcrumb trails leading from the train wrecks we've created through our bad karma and our mistakes, and, taking care of that, which is really fun, actually, improving yourself and your world, and others' worlds, through doing that. And once we're doing that in our own lives, we're trying to enjoy ourselves as much as we can, grounding ourselves into the now, and we're improving ourselves, becoming more aligned with life, and learning from our suffering, and respecting suffering as not like we're against life and life's against me, but it's like, no, all the suffering is a beautiful part of the play, of opposites, and it's that tension which makes life very beautiful. It's the tension of a string, not too loose, not too strong. It's not too easy, not too stressful, that it plays the music. Tune well the sitar string and all that. Then once we're doing that in our own lives, it's inevitably going to start to create a collective mirroring, and resonance of the same thing. And I think that's how we kind of get the planet in general out of suffering. It won't be like some bureaucrat with a Monopoly guy suit in some office somewhere signing a piece of paper, and then it fixes things, or someone really comes up with a very clever plan and then it starts to fix things. I don't think that's how it's going to go. I think it's decentralized, like everything in nature, decentralized feedback loops of experience gained from the environment. And that's what suffering is here to do. It's giving us that. It's the mechanism by which we get feedback from the environment about how we can be better. And so we do this in our own lives, and then that becomes, it resonates, and our family go, oh, wow, you're looking really good. Interesting. Maybe I want to do the same. Or maybe some of them resist it and they resent it. They don't like it. You think you're better than us? But then you deal with that. That's a challenge. It helps you grow. It helps them grow. They might not want to, but they might have to eventually admit that they're full of nonsense, or you might have to end the relationship. And again, that's all food for thought, and we all learn. But you just keep wisely pursuing your self-improvement and alignment with harmony and happiness, learning from suffering, like the alchemist, alchemy, transforming suffering into consciousness, and the lead into gold, and overall, once more and more individuals are doing this, more and more families start doing this, and then that's like, kind of exponential. It's not like 2 + 2 is 4. That's a bad example, actually. It'd be, it's not 3 + 3 is 6. It's 3 times 3 is 9. It's like exponential. Or 10 + 10 is 20. 10 times 10 is 100. So I think when you're in groups and you're doing that, it seems like, I don't know, I would imagine, maybe that's just speculative, that would accelerate, But nonetheless, we do that, and then, you have communities doing this, countries. I think that seems like that's the way we improve the world. Inner peace to bring outer peace, which isn't the point of this podcast. It's just like, the point is to make bizarre analogies, and play the song at the beginning about watermelon. But as a useful side note, we are talking about suffering and why it's here, how to transcend it, how it helps us. And I think when we keep all of that in mind, we can have a much healthier relationship with the things we don't like. And when we start to like what we don't like, then we get to a very special place. When it's instead of having what you want what you have, similar idea. And I think this is the final thing I'll leave you with, which is it Eckhart Tolle? I'm not sure. Some sort of, wise fellow or fellowess, in something like this: in the love of suffering, all thought of suffering ceases. Very good. So, hope this has been useful. If you're in a dark place, perhaps make light of the darkness, poke some fun at those shadows, and I think try to appreciate, that we all experience that more often than we pretend to others. Like, I still have, bouts of much shorter and less deep than I used to, but where I'll kind of get lost from my wisdom or whatever, and it can be very terrifying. But that everyone goes through this to some extent or other, and it's all kind of relative. People who are suffering all the time, real intense day, could just seem normal to you, but then you could be suffering just as much as someone who's had a very easy life and then has a kind of little bit of a messy day. And so it's not a competition, and we're all just trying to be a little bit better than yesterday. But that we can all kind of hopefully feel a bit more power and encouragement to move forward with this by moving into the present with it, by being aware that we're all on this journey, and that the journey is on our side, and the path wants to be walked upon. So, enjoy. All right. See ya.